When will your pension come out? I want to use it right away to pay my bills." Those words sliced through the quiet afternoon like a serrated knife, echoing against the pale yellow walls of my kitchen in Pine Ridge. I froze, my weathered hands clutching the delicate porcelain teacup my late husband Roger had given me on our 30th anniversary. The chamomile tea inside trembled slightly, mirroring the shock rippling through my body. At 67 years old, after dedicating 3.5 decades to nurturing generations of elementary school children, after raising 2 children of my own, after surviving the grief of widowhood, I had been reduced to this, a walking ATM machine for my own son. My name is Vivian Sullivan. For 35 years, I taught 3rd grade at Pine Ridge Elementary. I knew every family in our small Colorado mountain town, watched children grow up and bring their own children to my classroom. People respected me here. Parents trusted me with their most precious treasures. Former students would stop me at the Golden Years Cafe to tell me how I'd changed their lives. I was somebody who mattered, but in the eyes of my son Gregory, I had become nothing more than a means to an end, a reliable source of cash whenever his own poor decisions left him scrambling to maintain the illusion of success he so desperately clung to. Standing there in my modest kitchen, with its worn linoleum floor and the small window overlooking my carefully tended garden, I felt something inside me finally break. A dam of patience and maternal sacrifice that had been cracking for years suddenly gave way completely. Gregory paced around my kitchen, his expensive leather shoes, that I had probably inadvertently paid for, clicking against the floor. At 43, he still possessed the handsome features that had always made people forgive his flaws too easily. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his clothes fashionably tailored to hide the slight paunch developing around his middle. Everything about him was designed to project success, prosperity, confidence. Everything except the desperate look in his eyes when he talked about money. "Mom, you're not listening to me," he continued, running his hand through his hair in frustration. The condo association raised their fees again, and Rebecca's car needs transmission work. Plus, I've got clients who haven't paid their commissions yet. It's just temporary. I'll pay you back as soon as things turn around. The familiar refrain. Always temporary. Always promises of repayment that never materialized. Always some new crisis that only my pension could solve. I'd heard it all before. So many times that the words had worn grooves in my heart, like water eroding stone over decades. I thought about the cruise I had planned to take with Harriet next month, the one I'd been saving for since Roger passed, the one I'd have to cancel if I gave Gregory the money he was demanding. I thought about the growing stack of medical bills in my desk drawer from the knee surgery I'd delayed telling my children about. I thought about the careful budget I maintained, making my teacher's pension stretch to cover my modest needs and the occasional small luxury. All of it threatened again by my son's insatiable financial demands. "Gregory," I said quietly, setting my teacup down with deliberate care, "I don't think I can help this time. My own expenses." He didn't let me finish. His face darkened like a summer storm rolling over our mountain town. "Your expenses? What expenses? You live in this paid-off house. You barely travel. You wear the same clothes for years. Meanwhile, I'm trying to maintain professional relationships, present the right image to clients. Do you know what it costs to live in Denver these days?" Each word hit like hail on a tin roof, sharp, cold, relentless. I felt myself shrinking under the barrage, a lifetime of maternal instinct urging me to give in, to help, to sacrifice. Wasn't that what mothers did? Wasn't that what I'd always done? But something different stirred within me this time, a quiet voice growing stronger by the second. It whispered of dignity, of boundaries, of self-respect, of the difference between helping and enabling, of the damage I was doing to both of us by continuing this pattern. "I'm sorry, but the answer is no," I said, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. Gregory stopped pacing. His expression shifted from frustration to disbelief, then quickly to anger. He walked toward me, leaning down so his face was inches from mine, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "No? After everything I've done for you? Who drove you to your doctor's appointments last year? Who helped fix your roof after the storm? You're going to turn your back on your own son when he needs help? The selective memory, the manipulation, the guilt, they were all familiar tactics. The few times he'd helped me were being wielded now as weapons, while the countless times I'd rescued him financially were conveniently forgotten. I stood my ground, though my heart raced painfully in my chest. I love you, Gregory, but this has to stop. I can't keep... That's when it happened. His control snapped like a dry twig, his face contorted with rage as he slammed his hand on my kitchen counter, sending my teacup crashing to the floor. Tea splattered across the linoleum as porcelain shards skittered under the refrigerator. When will your pension come out? I want to use it right away to pay my bills. The words exploded from him, bouncing off the walls of my small kitchen. Not a question, but a demand. Not a request for help, but an expectation of entitlement. In that moment, I saw with perfect clarity what our relationship had become. Not the loving bond between mother and son I had always tried to maintain, but a transaction, a business arrangement where my only value was the financial support I could provide. I stepped back, feeling the edge of the counter press against my spine. Gregory loomed over me, his breath coming in quick, angry bursts. For a fleeting second I felt afraid, not that he would hurt me physically, but afraid of the stranger my son had become, or perhaps afraid of the reality I had been avoiding for so long. The shattered teacup on the floor seemed to mirror something breaking within me, but unlike the irreparable porcelain, what broke inside me wasn't my strength. It was my willingness to participate in this destructive pattern any longer. You should go now, I said quietly, each word carefully measured. Not until we figure this out, he insisted, though some of the fire had left his voice, replaced by a calculating coldness that was almost worse. There's nothing to figure out. I've given you my answer. He stared at me for a long moment, disbelief evident in his eyes. I had never stood firm before. For decades I had been the soft place for him to land, the safety net that never failed, the well that never ran dry. Now for the first time, I was saying no, and meaning it. Fine, he spat finally, grabbing his keys from the counter. When you change your mind, call me. And you will change your mind, Mom. You always do. With that parting shot, he stormed out, letting the screen door slam behind him with such force that the small window in its frame rattled precariously. Through that window, I watched him climb into his luxury SUV, another status symbol he couldn't truly afford, and speed away, gravel from my driveway spraying in his wake. As the sound of his engine faded into the distance, I slowly knelt to pick up the pieces of my shattered teacup, careful not to cut my fingers on the sharp edges. Each fragment I collected seemed to represent a piece of our relationship, broken, perhaps beyond repair. Tears blurred my vision, but they weren't tears of surrender or defeat. They were tears of clarity, of resolution. I'm tired of this exploitation, I whispered to the empty kitchen. I'm going to have to do this. I didn't fully know yet what this would be, but as I rose stiffly from my knees, joints protesting after decades of classroom work, I felt a new determination taking root. For too long, I had enabled Gregory's financial dependence, sacrificing my own security and dignity in the name of maternal love. But true love, the kind that helps someone grow and thrive, sometimes requires the courage to say no. Sometimes it requires drastic measures. Moving to my small desk in the corner of the living room, I opened my leather-bound journal, the one where I'd been documenting Gregory's loans for years, each one with a date and amount, none ever repaid. The total sum made my stomach clench. It represented not just money, but years of manipulation, of boundaries ignored, of my retirement security slowly eroded. I picked up my pen and began to write. Not another tally of financial exploitation, but the outline of a plan. A plan that would either break our toxic pattern once and for all, or break our relationship entirely. A plan that filled me with equal parts terror and exhilaration. That night, after Gregory stormed out of my house, I barely slept. I lay in bed watching shadows from the pine trees outside dance across my ceiling, my mind racing through decades of memories. When exactly had our relationship transformed from mother and son to exploiter and exploited? It hadn't happened overnight. Like erosion on our Colorado mountainsides, It had occurred gradually, almost imperceptibly, until suddenly the landscape was unrecognizable. I remembered Gregory as a little boy, with skinned knees and curious eyes, asking questions faster than I could answer them. I remembered him as a teenager, moody but kind-hearted, defending a bullied classmate even when it cost him socially. When had that boy become this man who shouted demands about my pension? What role had I played in that transformation? The first rays of dawn were filtering through my curtains when I finally gave up on sleep. I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table, where evidence of yesterday's confrontation remained. A small chip in the linoleum where Gregory's keys had fallen. The empty space on my shelf where my anniversary teacup once stood. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from my daughter, Angela, in Portland. "Mom, everything okay? Greg called last night ranting about you refusing to help him. Call me." I sighed, set the phone down without responding, and walked to my small home office. From the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet, I retrieved a folder labeled Loans to Gregory. Inside were careful records of every dollar I'd given him over the past 6 years since my retirement. The amounts started small, $200 here, $500 there. "Just until my commission comes through," he'd say, or "just until Rebecca gets her next paycheck." But gradually, the amounts increased. $2,000 for car repairs, $3,500 for business expenses, $5,000 for overdue rent after he and Rebecca moved into a luxury apartment they couldn't afford. Each time, there were promises of repayment that never materialized. Each time, there were dramatic tales of the terrible consequences if I didn't help. Eviction, repossession, damage to his professional reputation. The total sum made me feel physically ill. $47,980. Nearly half of my retirement savings gone. And that wasn't counting the gifts I'd given when he needed new clothes for work, or when Rebecca's birthday came around, or when they wanted a weekend getaway to de-stress. My pension from the Colorado State Teachers' Retirement System provided enough for me to live modestly but comfortably. If I was careful, if I budgeted wisely, if I didn't have unexpected medical expenses. But it wasn't designed to support 2 households, especially when one of those households insisted on maintaining appearances well beyond their means. A knock at my front door interrupted my calculations. I quickly tucked the folder away and went to answer, half expecting to find Gregory ready for another round of demands. Instead, I found Harriet Wilson, my neighbor and closest friend, holding a basket of fresh blueberry muffins. "Thought you might need these," she said, her sharp eyes taking in my disheveled appearance. At 71, Harriet had the energy of someone 20 years younger and a directness that came from decades as a social worker. "Saw Gregory tear out of your driveway yesterday like he was auditioning for NASCAR. Another money fight?" I nodded, stepping back to let her in. We settled in my small living room, the muffin basket between us on the coffee table. Through the window, we could see the mountains that had watched over Pine Ridge for millennia, indifferent to human dramas unfolding in their shadow. He wanted money from my next pension check, I admitted, picking at a muffin without eating it. I said no for once. He didn't take it well. Harriet's expression softened with understanding but not surprise. She'd been warning me about this situation for years, had seen it unfold countless times in her professional life. Elderly parents drained of resources by adult children who never learned financial independence. "What made this time different?" she asked. "You've been giving in to his demands for years." I considered her question carefully, trying to articulate the shift I'd felt. "I looked at him yesterday, Harriet, and I didn't recognize my son anymore. All I saw was someone who viewed me as a resource to be exploited, not a person with my own needs, my own future to worry about. And I realized that by continuing to give in, I wasn't helping him. I was helping destroy him." Harriet reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Her skin was marked with the same age spots as mine, her knuckles similarly swollen from arthritis. That's a painful realization for any parent. "The thing is," I continued, feeling a lump form in my throat, "I don't know what to do now. I've been enabling him for so long that I don't think a simple no will change anything. He'll just keep coming back, keep pushing, keep manipulating until I give in again. So what are you considering?" I hesitated, then walked back to my desk and retrieved the leather-bound journal where I'd been outlining my plan the night before. I handed it to Harriet, watching her expression as she read my barely formed thoughts. Her eyebrows rose progressively higher with each page. When she finished, she closed the journal carefully and handed it back to me. "Vivian, this is extreme." "I know. It would cause tremendous pain to a lot of people, not just Gregory." "I know that too." And yet, she trailed off, looking thoughtfully at the mountains outside my window. "And yet," I prompted, "and yet I've seen situations like yours destroy families completely when they are not addressed. I've seen elderly parents end up in subsidized housing because they gave everything to children who never learned responsibility. I've seen those same children spiral into deeper dysfunction, untethered from reality, unable to live within their means." She turned back to me, her gaze direct and unflinching. Sometimes a radical intervention is the only option left. We sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of potential decisions hanging in the air between us. "Would you help me?" I finally asked. "If I decided to go through with this?" Harriet didn't answer immediately. She took a muffin from the basket, broke it in half methodically, and set it back down without eating it. "What about Angela and Tyler? Have you considered the impact on them?" I nodded. My daughter Angela had built a successful life in Portland, financially independent and always responsible. My grandson Tyler, Gregory's son from his first marriage, was in his third year of law school at Colorado State, working part-time and managing his student loans carefully. They were the counterpoints to Gregory's financial irresponsibility, proof that I hadn't completely failed as a parent. "I'd need to speak with Angela first," I admitted. "Get her perspective, her support. Tyler, I'm not sure. He's caught in the middle and I hate to put him in that position." My phone buzzed again with another text from Angela. "Mom, please call. Worried about you." Harriet saw the message and raised an eyebrow. "Might as well start there. See what your daughter thinks." After Harriet left, promising her support whatever I decided, I called Angela. She answered immediately, her voice tight with concern. "Mom, what's going on? Greg called me last night saying you've cut him off completely, that you don't care if he loses his apartment. He sounded really upset." I closed my eyes, steeling myself. "Angela, we need to have a serious conversation about your brother, about what's been happening these past few years." For the next hour, I laid it all out for her. The escalating financial demands, the emotional manipulation, the toll it was taking on my health and security. I told her about the folder documenting nearly $48,000 in loans, about the cruise with Harriet I'd have to cancel, about the medical bills I'd been hiding from both my children. "Why didn't you tell me this was happening?" Angela asked, her voice a mixture of shock and hurt. "I had no idea it was this bad. I was ashamed," I admitted. "Ashamed that I'd raised a son who would treat me this way. Ashamed that I kept giving in. Ashamed that I didn't know how to fix it." "This isn't your fault, Mom," Angela said firmly. "Greg's always been, well, Greg. Even as kids, he expected the world to bend to his wishes. Remember how he'd throw those tantrums in the grocery store when you wouldn't buy him candy? How he'd cry about the unfairness of having an earlier bedtime than me, even though I was 3 years older?" I smiled sadly at the memories. Those childhood behaviors had seemed normal at the time. Just a spirited child testing boundaries. I hadn't recognized them as warning signs of entitlement that would grow unchecked into adulthood. "So what are you going to do now?" Angela asked after a pause. I took a deep breath and outlined the plan I had been developing, the plan that had shocked Harriet with its extremity, but that felt increasingly like my only option. The line went silent for so long that I thought we'd been disconnected. "Angela, I'm here," she said quietly. "Just processing. This would be traumatic for everyone involved, Mom. For Greg, obviously, but also for Tyler, for me, for your friends in Pine Ridge. Are you sure there's no other way? What would you suggest? I've tried saying no before. I've tried explaining my financial situation. I've tried asking for repayment of previous loans. Nothing changes." Another long pause. "You're right," she finally conceded. I can't believe it's come to this." "Neither can I whispered, feeling tears well up. "But I don't see another path forward, not one that leads to real change." "If you do this," Angela said slowly, I'll support you. I won't like it, but I'll understand why it's necessary, and I'll help however I can." That evening, I sat on my back porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. A family of deer grazed cautiously at the edge of my property, a mother and two nearly grown fawns. I watched the mother deer scan constantly for threats, ever vigilant in protecting her young. But eventually, those fawns would have to navigate the world on their own, facing predators and harsh winters without her intervention. My phone rang, displaying Gregory's number. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a text message appeared. "Mom, I'm sorry about yesterday. I was stressed. Can we talk? I really need your help this month. Just this once. Just this once." The same words he'd used dozens of times before. I set the phone down without responding and turned my attention back to the mountains, which had witnessed centuries of human joy and suffering with equal impassivity. The next morning, I drove to the First Community Bank of Pine Ridge, where I'd been banking since I first moved to town as a young teacher. Martha Jenkins, the manager who had helped me set up college funds for both Gregory and Angela decades ago, greeted me warmly. "What can I do for you today, Vivian?" she asked, ushering me into her office. "I need to make some changes to my accounts," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "And I need to discuss some options for accessing my funds from out of state." Martha's expression shifted subtly. In a small town like Pine Ridge, bank managers often developed instincts about their clients' situations. "May I ask what's prompting these changes?" I hesitated, then decided honesty was the best approach. "I'm concerned about financial exploitation, Martha. I need to protect myself." Understanding dawned in her eyes. She'd seen this before too. "I see. Let's talk about your options." For the next hour, we restructured my accounts, set up new security protocols, and created a financial plan that would allow me access to my funds without leaving easy tracks. It wouldn't stop a determined investigator, Martha warned me, but it would make casual tracking difficult. As I left the bank, I felt a strange mixture of dread and determination. The plan that had started as a desperate fantasy was taking concrete shape. Each step I took, the conversation with Angela, the meeting with Martha, the careful preparations I was making, moved me closer to a point of no return. That afternoon, I visited Dr. Raymond Jackson, a therapist recommended by Harriet, who specialized in family dynamics and elderly issues. I needed professional perspective, needed to ensure I wasn't making a catastrophic mistake. Dr. Jackson listened without judgment as I outlined my situation and my proposed solution. His office was soothing, plants thriving in every corner, a small fountain creating gentle background noise, mountains visible through wide windows. "What you're describing is a form of financial abuse," he said when I finished. "It's more common than many people realize, especially directed at elderly parents. The shame victims feel often prevents them from seeking help. But is my plan, is it too extreme?" I asked, voicing my deepest fear. "Am I overreacting?" He considered this carefully. "Extreme situations sometimes require extreme responses. You've tried conventional approaches without success. Your son has demonstrated a pattern of exploitation that shows no signs of changing through normal intervention. So you think I should do this? I can't make that decision for you," he said gently. "But I can tell you that what you're experiencing is real, valid, and serious. Your concerns about your financial security are legitimate. Your desire to break this destructive pattern is healthy. And sometimes a profound shock is the only thing that can catalyze genuine change." I nodded, absorbing his words. "If I go through with this, would you be willing to speak with my son afterward? If he's ready?" "Of course," Dr. Jackson assured me. "I'd be happy to help with the aftermath, whatever you decide." As I drove home from his office, a powerful thunderstorm rolled across the mountains. Lightning illuminated the darkening sky, and rain pounded against my windshield. It felt fitting, nature mirroring the emotional tempest inside me. That night I finalized my plan. I wrote letters to be discovered later, one for Gregory, one for Angela, one for Tyler. I made lists of what I would need, what steps I would take, what precautions would be necessary. I researched bus routes out of Pine Ridge, temporary housing options in Cedar Lake, Oregon, how to live off the grid without leaving an electronic trail. 3 days after Gregory had stormed out of my house demanding my pension money, I was ready. My small suitcase was packed with essentials. Enough clothes for a week, medications, important documents, a few cherished photos. I'd withdrawn enough cash to sustain me for several months, stored in various pockets of my clothing and luggage. I'd arranged for Harriet to occasionally check on my house, water my plants, collect my mail. The morning of my departure dawned clear and cool, a perfect Colorado spring day. I stood in my kitchen, looking around at the home I'd made over decades, wondering when or if I would see it again. I wrote a simple note and left it on the counter. Gone to the pharmacy, back soon. It wasn't a complete lie. I would stop at the Mountain View Pharmacy on my way out of town to fill my prescriptions one last time before disappearing. But I wouldn't be coming back soon. Not until Gregory had experienced what it truly meant to lose his mother. Not just her financial support, but her presence, her love, her existence in his life. As I locked my front door, I whispered a silent apology to the friends and neighbors who would worry about me. To Tyler, who would be caught in the painful aftermath. To Angela, who would have to maintain my secret while watching her brother suffer. Most of all, I apologized to the mother I had once been. The woman who believed in unconditional love, who couldn't imagine deliberately causing her child pain. But as I walked to my car with my suitcase, I felt something unexpected beneath the guilt and dread. Hope. Hope that this drastic action might finally break the cycle of exploitation. Hope that Gregory might find his way to genuine independence and responsibility. Hope that someday we might rebuild our relationship on healthier terms. I placed my suitcase in the trunk, got behind the wheel, and backed out of the driveway of the only home my children had ever known. As I drove through the familiar streets of Pine Ridge one last time, I steeled myself for what was to come. The plan I had set in motion would cause tremendous pain, to Gregory, to my family, to myself. But sometimes healing requires first cutting out the infection, no matter how deep the wound. The first leg of my journey took me away from Pine Ridge in a Greyhound bus, my small suitcase stowed beneath my seat rather than in the luggage compartment. I'd chosen a window seat near the middle, not hiding in the back, not exposing myself in the front. As the bus pulled away from the station, I watched my mountain town recede in the distance, the morning sun illuminating the peaks I'd gazed at every day for decades. Would I ever see them again? The question lingered as we descended into the plains toward Denver. I felt oddly calm. The decision had been made, the plan set in motion. There was a strange freedom in having crossed that threshold, in having taken this irrevocable step. I touched the small notebook in my purse where I'd written my itinerary. Not a direct route to Cedar Lake, but a winding path designed to obscure my trail. Denver to Salt Lake City, Salt Lake to Boise, Boise to Portland, and finally, Portland to Cedar Lake. Each segment purchased separately with cash, under slightly different names. The woman beside me, a young mother with a sleeping toddler on her lap, attempted conversation several times. I responded politely but briefly, offering nothing personal, asking no questions that might make me memorable in her mind. When she finally dozed off, I allowed myself to wonder what was happening in Pine Ridge. Had Gregory tried to reach me again? Had he noticed my absence yet? Probably not. Our confrontation had been just 3 days ago. He typically avoided contact for at least a week after our arguments, waiting until he believed my anger had cooled before approaching me again with the same old demands. By the time he realized something was truly wrong, I would be hundreds of miles away, my trail growing colder by the hour. In Denver, I transferred to a bus headed for Salt Lake City. This time I sat next to an elderly man who slept most of the journey, his soft snores providing a rhythmic soundtrack as we crossed the Colorado-Utah border. I watched the landscape change through my window, mountains giving way to red rock formations, forests thinning into scrubland. It occurred to me that I'd rarely left Colorado in the past decade. Roger and I had always talked about traveling more after retirement, but his sudden heart attack had ended those dreams before they began. Night was falling when we reached Salt Lake City. I found a modest motel several blocks from the bus station, paid cash for a single night, and used the name Virginia Miller for the first time. The desk clerk barely glanced at me. Just another older woman traveling alone. Unremarkable, forgettable. In my room, I turned on the small television to a local news channel, half expecting to see my face appear on the screen. But of course, it was too soon for that. To the world, I was just a grandmother who'd gone to the pharmacy and hadn't yet returned. Not unusual enough to warrant concern, let alone a missing person report. I slept fitfully that night. Dreams filled with Gregory's angry face, with Tyler's confusion, with Angela's reluctant complicity. I woke before dawn, showered quickly, and left the motel without taking advantage of the continental breakfast. Better to minimize contact with other guests. The next 3 days passed in a blur of bus terminals, cheap motels, and changing landscapes. I maintained my routine of paying cash, using my Virginia Miller alias, and avoiding unnecessary interactions. In Boise, I purchased a disposable phone, not to make calls, but to check news websites from Pine Ridge and to receive the occasional secure message from Angela, who would be my only link to my former life. When I finally reached Portland, I felt a powerful urge to call Angela, to see her face, to embrace my daughter and reassure myself that some family bonds remained intact. But we'd agreed that direct contact was too risky. Instead, I sent a coded text message from my disposable phone to let her know I'd arrived safely, then boarded the final bus to Cedar Lake. Cedar Lake, Oregon, was everything Pine Ridge wasn't. Flat where my hometown was mountainous, lush and green, where Colorado was often dry and brown, humid where the air at home was crisp and thin. The small lakeside community catered to tourists in summer and maintained a sleepy existence the rest of the year. It was perfect for someone who wanted to blend in without standing out, to exist without being particularly noticed. Walter Thornton, my friend from the Pine Ridge Senior Center, had kept his promise. His vacation cabin, a modest one-bedroom structure on the outskirts of town, was prepared for my arrival. A key waited under a flower pot on the porch, just as he'd described. Inside, I found basic provisions stocked in the kitchen, fresh linens on the bed, and a note. Virginia, make yourself at home for as long as needed. Rent is paid through December. The neighbors think you're my cousin from Michigan recovering from a recent loss. Stay well. W. I sank onto the small sofa, overwhelmed by the reality of what I'd done. I was here. I'd successfully disappeared. My old life was now officially on pause, and a new temporary existence was beginning. The weight of it all, the magnitude of my decision, the unknown consequences that would unfold, the pain I was knowingly causing, crashed over me like a wave. For the first time since leaving Pine Ridge, I wept. When the tears subsided, I unpacked my few belongings and explored my temporary home. The cabin was rustic but comfortable, with a small kitchen, a living room with a fireplace, a bedroom with a view of distant trees, and a bathroom with a shower that provided inconsistent water pressure. It sat on a quarter-acre lot, with other similar cabins visible, but not close enough for casual neighborly surveillance. That night, I used my disposable phone to check the Pine Ridge Gazette's website. Nothing about a missing local woman. It was still too soon. Tomorrow would mark only the 4th day since my disappearance. Not long enough for serious concern, especially with the note I'd left implying a quick errand. The next morning, I woke to birdsong unlike the mountain birds I was accustomed to hearing. I made coffee in the unfamiliar kitchen and sat on the small porch, watching the early light play across the lake in the distance. What would I do with myself now? How would I fill the days, weeks, possibly months of this self-imposed exile? I'd brought several books with me, but reading alone wouldn't be enough to occupy my mind or prevent me from obsessing over what was happening back in Pine Ridge. I needed structure, purpose, human interaction, carefully managed to protect my new identity. After breakfast, I walked into town, about a mile from the cabin. Cedar Lake's main street was a charming collection of small businesses catering primarily to tourists. Cafes, gift shops, a bookstore, an art gallery. At the community bulletin board outside the local grocery store, I scanned the notices for possibilities. One flyer caught my eye. Cedar Lake Senior Center. Activities, community purpose. The schedule listed everything from chair yoga to book clubs to art classes. It was perfect. a place where I could establish a routine, meet people without getting too close, become part of the community while maintaining necessary distance. The following day, I visited the center for the first time. The building was smaller than our facility in Pine Ridge, but warm and inviting. A woman about my age greeted me at the reception desk. "First time visiting us?" she asked with a genuine smile. "Yes," I replied, feeling strange about the half-truths I was about to tell. "I'm Virginia Miller. Just moved here from Michigan to stay in my cousin's cabin for a while. Thought I'd check out what's available locally." "Well, you've come to the right place. I'm Elaine, the activities coordinator. What sorts of things interest you, Virginia?" I hesitated, realizing I hadn't thought much about what might interest Virginia Miller, as opposed to Vivian Sullivan. This new identity gave me the freedom to reinvent myself, to explore facets of my personality that had been dormant during my years of teaching and parenting. "Art, I think," I said, surprising myself with the answer. "I've always wanted to learn to paint." Elaine's face lit up. "Perfect timing. We have an art class starting this afternoon. Landscape painting with acrylics. Ruth is a wonderful teacher, very patient with beginners." And so began my new routine. 3 times a week, I walked to the senior center for art classes. On Tuesdays, I joined the book club. On Thursdays, I participated in chair yoga. I became Virginia Miller fully, a quiet widow from Michigan, recovering from unspecified loss, finding solace in creative pursuits and gentle exercise. The art classes in particular became my sanctuary. Ruth, a retired art teacher in her 70s, had a gift for encouraging raw talent while gently correcting technique. Under her guidance, I discovered an ability I never knew I possessed. My first attempts at capturing Cedar Lake's landscapes were clumsy, but showed promise. By my 3rd week, I was producing work that Ruth deemed remarkably intuitive for a beginner. "You have a natural eye for composition," she told me one day, as we packed up our supplies. "Have you ever painted before?" "No," I answered truthfully. "Never had the time, or maybe never made the time." She nodded knowingly. "That's often the case. We postpone the things that might bring us joy until some mythical future when we'll have enough time. Then life happens, and suddenly we're in our 60s, wondering where the years went." Her words resonated deeply, making me reflect on all the things I'd postponed during my years of teaching and raising children. Hobbies abandoned, interests shelved, dreams deferred, all in service to others. Even my retirement had quickly become another opportunity to serve Gregory's needs rather than exploring my own. 1 week turned into 2, then a month. I settled into my new life with surprising ease. During the day, I attended center activities, painted in the cabin, or walked along the lakeshore. In the evenings, I checked Pine Ridge news sources and awaited secure communications from Angela. The first local news report about my disappearance appeared exactly 8 days after I left. Local concern grows for missing retired teacher. Pine Ridge residents are expressing concern for beloved retired elementary school teacher Vivian Sullivan, 67, who has not been seen since leaving her home for a pharmacy errand over a week ago. Sullivan's son, local real estate agent Gregory Sullivan, reported her missing after finding her home empty with a note indicating a short absence. Anyone with information is asked to contact the Pine Ridge Police Department. I studied the accompanying photo, a recent one from the elementary school's retirement celebration 2 years ago. I looked happy, surrounded by former students and colleagues, unaware of how my life would unravel in the years following that moment. 2 days later, Angela's first secure message arrived. G organizing search parties, police involved, Tyler devastated, media picking up story, be safe, love you. The following weeks brought escalating coverage. My disappearance became front-page news in Pine Ridge. Local television stations ran segments featuring interviews with Gregory, who appeared appropriately distraught, his eyes red-rimmed, his voice breaking as he pleaded for information about his missing mother. "She's everything to me," he told one reporter, tears streaming down his face. "I just want her home safe. Please, if anyone has seen her, contact the police immediately." Watching him on my small phone screen, I felt a confusing mixture of emotions. Satisfaction that my absence was forcing him to confront our broken relationship, guilt over the genuine pain I saw in his expression, doubt about whether my plan was too cruel, hope that this experience might catalyze real change. The search expanded. Volunteers combed the woods around Pine Ridge. My photo appeared on missing persons websites. Theories emerged. Had I wandered off, confused? Had I been the victim of a crime? Had I intentionally disappeared? Gregory dismissed this last possibility vehemently in another interview. My mother would never abandon her family, her friends, her community. Something has happened to her. She needs our help. Angela's messages became more frequent, updating me on developments while maintaining our security protocols. G speaking to media daily. Seems genuinely devastated. Not sleeping. Police searched house again, found nothing. Tyler staying with G now. Vigil held at elementary school. Hundreds attended. Your former students, now adults with their own children, sharing stories about how you changed their lives. G started therapy. Says he can't live with himself if last conversation with you was an argument about money. Mentioned regrets, poor choices. This last message gave me pause. Was Gregory truly reflecting on his behavior? Or was this another manipulation? This time aimed at the community rather than at me. It was impossible to know from a distance. By the 2-month mark, my life as Virginia Miller had taken on a rhythm of its own. My paintings improved dramatically under Ruth's guidance. The center hosted a small exhibition of student work, and to my shock, my landscape of Cedar Lake at sunset sold for $200 to a local restaurant owner who wanted it for his dining room. You could make a small business of this, Ruth suggested as she helped me pack up my remaining pieces. Your work has a distinctive style, nostalgic but not sentimental, detailed but not fussy. People respond to it. The idea took root. With Ruth's help, I created more pieces specifically for sale. The local gallery agreed to display a few on consignment. To my astonishment, they sold within weeks. Soon, I had a small but steady income from my artwork. Not enough to live on, but enough to supplement my carefully rationed savings without touching my pension. There was something profoundly satisfying about earning money through my own creativity rather than my labor. For the first time in my life, I was being valued for something that brought me joy rather than for my service to others. Meanwhile, the intensity of the search for Vivian Sullivan gradually diminished, though never completely disappeared. The news coverage became less frequent. The police investigation cooled as leads dried up. Life in Pine Ridge began to move forward without me, as I knew it eventually would. But Gregory, according to Angela's reports, remained fixated on finding me. He reduced his work hours to dedicate more time to the search. He established a small foundation in my name to keep attention on my case. He appeared on a national television program about missing persons, breaking down during the interview. When describing our last conversation, the last thing I said to her was about money. He admitted to millions of viewers. I was demanding her pension to pay my bills. What kind of son does that to his mother? If I could take it back, if I could just see her one more time. Watching the clip on my phone, alone in Walter's cabin as rain drummed against the roof, I felt tears stream down my face. Was this genuine remorse? Had my desperate plan actually worked? Or was Gregory simply playing a role? The devoted son devastated by his mother's disappearance. 4 months into my self-imposed exile, I made a decision that would change the course of my plan. With Ruth's encouragement, I submitted 3 paintings to a juried art show in Portland under my Virginia Miller identity. To my shock, not only were all 3 accepted, but one received an honorable mention and sold for $200 to a collector from Denver. The gallery owner who had organized the show approached me after the opening reception. "Your work has a unique perspective, Virginia," she said. "Would you consider creating a series for a solo exhibition next spring? Perhaps 10 to 12 pieces capturing the changing moods of Cedar Lake throughout the seasons?" The opportunity was beyond anything I had imagined possible when I first picked up a paintbrush 4 months earlier. It represented not just artistic validation, but a potential new path forward, a way to support myself through work I loved rather than depending on my pension alone. I accepted the offer, knowing it would mean extending my time as Virginia Miller beyond what I had initially planned. But as I walked back to my cabin that evening, watching the moonlight shimmer on the lake's surface, I realized something profound had shifted within me. This disappearance, that had begun as a desperate attempt to change my son, had unexpectedly transformed me instead. As winter descended on Cedar Lake, I settled into my routine with increasing comfort. The holiday season approached, my first away from Pine Ridge, away from family traditions established over decades. I expected to feel overwhelming loneliness, but instead found myself embracing the strange freedom of reinvention. Virginia Miller had no Christmas traditions to uphold, no expectations to meet, no family dynamics to navigate. The Senior Center organized a holiday art sale to benefit local charities, and Ruth insisted I participate. "Your work is ready, Virginia. People connect with it. Trust me on this." I selected 5 paintings for the sale: 2 lake scenes, a forest path in autumn, a mountain vista reminiscent of my Colorado home, and a small study of birds at dawn. Ruth helped me frame them properly and decide on pricing. "Don't undervalue your work," she cautioned. "Amateur doesn't mean worthless." The morning of the sale, I arranged my pieces on the assigned table, feeling oddly vulnerable. These paintings represented more than just pigment on canvas. They were expressions of my new self, tangible evidence of Virginia Miller's existence. Selling them felt like offering pieces of my soul to strangers. To my astonishment, all 5 paintings sold within the first 2 hours. A summer resident buying a holiday gift for his wife purchased the mountain scene. An elderly couple claimed both lake paintings for their grandchildren. The forest path went to the local doctor for his waiting room, and most surprisingly, the bird study was purchased by Margaret Chen, the social worker who ran the center's elder support programs. "There's something so peaceful about it," she told me, studying the small canvas with appreciative eyes. "Something that speaks of patience and quiet observation. It's exactly what I need in my office to remind me to slow down and notice the details." I thanked her, trying not to show how deeply her words affected me. Throughout my life, I'd been valued for my service to others, as a teacher, a mother, a community volunteer. Never before had someone valued something I created purely for the joy of creation. Margaret lingered at my table after the other customers had moved on. "You have remarkable talent for someone who just started painting," she observed. "Ruth tells me you've never had formal training." "No," I admitted. "It's new to me. Isn't it fascinating how life sometimes reveals hidden parts of ourselves through unexpected circumstances?" She smiled warmly. "I've worked with seniors for 30 years, and I've seen it happen often. A late life discovery of a passion or talent that was always there, just waiting for the right moment to emerge." Her words resonated deeply. Would I ever have discovered this artistic ability if I'd remained in Pine Ridge, caught in the endless cycle of Gregory's demands? Perhaps my disappearance, begun as a desperate attempt to help my son, had actually been the universe's way of helping me find myself. As December progressed, my reputation as an artist grew in the small community. The gallery in town offered me wall space for a permanent display. A local cafe commissioned a series of small works for their dining area. For the first time in my life, I was earning money doing something I genuinely loved, something that belonged to me alone, not defined by my relationship to others. Meanwhile, news from Pine Ridge continued to arrive through Angela's secure messages. The holiday season had intensified Gregory's distress over my absence. He had organized a Christmas Eve candlelight vigil at my home, which nearly 200 people attended despite the bitter Colorado cold. "Tyler spoke," Angela reported, "said Christmas without you feels wrong, but that your love for your students and family lives on in how they treat others." G broke down completely, couldn't finish his speech. I tried to imagine the scene, my modest home illuminated by candlelight, familiar faces gathered in the snow, my son and grandson struggling to speak through their grief. The guilt was crushing, but I reminded myself of the purpose behind my actions. This pain, however acute, was necessary for healing to occur. Another message from Angela arrived just after New Year's. G sold his luxury SUV, moved to smaller apartment, continues therapy weekly. Therapist apparently suggested he examine patterns of financial dependency. Tyler says G is finally growing up at 43. This news gave me pause. Was Gregory genuinely changing? Or was this another performance? a way to elicit sympathy from the community during his mother's mysterious absence. It was impossible to know from a distance, but the possibility that my plan might actually be working sent a surge of hope through me. January brought heavy rain to Cedar Lake, keeping me indoors most days. I used the time to work on pieces for the Portland exhibition, developing a series that captured the lake through changing weather and light. As I painted, I found myself incorporating subtle elements from my Colorado past, a particular quality of mountain light, rock formations reminiscent of the Rockies, cloud patterns I'd observed from my Pine Ridge porch for decades. "Your work is evolving," Ruth noted during one of our sessions. "There's a dialogue happening between your present and something else, your past, perhaps, or somewhere you're longing for." I nodded non-committally, careful not to reveal too much. But she was right. In these paintings, Virginia Miller and Vivian Sullivan were beginning to merge, not in ways obvious to observers, but in technical choices and compositional decisions that represented an integration of my two selves. In February, I received a call from the Portland Gallery owner about my upcoming exhibition. "We've had tremendous interest since announcing your show," she told me. "A collector from Denver saw your piece from the winter showcase and has been inquiring about acquiring more of your work." A collector from Denver. The word sent a chill through me. What were the chances? Surely it couldn't be. "Did this collector mention a name?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Privacy policy prevents me from sharing that information," she explained. "But they're quite serious. They've requested first viewing of your new collection before the exhibition opens." I thanked her and ended the call, my mind racing. Denver had nearly 3 million people in its metropolitan area. The odds of my artwork randomly attracting Gregory's attention were astronomically small, and yet strange coincidences happened every day. Could fate really be orchestrating such an unlikely reunion? I pushed the thought aside as irrational. More likely, the collector was exactly what they appeared to be, an art enthusiast who had connected with my work and wanted more. Still, I made a mental note to avoid attending the Portland exhibition opening in person, just in case. As winter slowly released its grip on Cedar Lake, I found myself thinking more frequently about Pine Ridge, about the life I'd left behind. According to Angela's updates, the search for Vivian Sullivan had become less active, but never completely ceased. Gregory had established a small foundation in my name that offered scholarships to aspiring teachers and maintained a website about my disappearance. "Website has timeline, photos, updates on investigation," Angela reported. "G posts weekly messages to you, hoping you'll somehow see them." Last one said, "Mom, wherever you are, I understand now. I'm sorry for what I did, for who I became. Please come home so I can tell you in person." Reading those words on my disposable phone screen, sitting on Walter's porch as spring birds returned to Cedar Lake, I felt tears slide down my cheeks. Was it possible? Had my desperate gambit actually succeeded in breaking through Gregory's entitlement and self-absorption? I pulled out my journal and reviewed the conditions I'd set for myself before leaving Pine Ridge. I would stay away for 6 months, I'd decided. 6 months to give Gregory time to experience my absence, not just as the loss of financial support, but as the loss of his mother. 6 months to give myself space to heal from years of exploitation. 6 months to determine whether our relationship could be salvaged or was irreparably broken. Those 6 months had now passed. In fact, I'd been gone almost 7 months. The Portland exhibition was scheduled for the following month. I had decisions to make, whether to return to Pine Ridge and reveal my deliberate disappearance, whether to maintain my new identity as Virginia Miller permanently, whether to attempt reconciliation with Gregory, or accept that our relationship might be beyond repair. I took my questions to Margaret Chen during one of our weekly coffee meetings. Without revealing my true situation, I posed a hypothetical scenario about family estrangement and the possibility of reconciliation. "Healing family relationships is complex," Margaret said thoughtfully, stirring her tea, "especially when there's been a pattern of harm. Reconciliation requires genuine change from the person who caused harm, not just temporary remorse or performative gestures." "How can you tell if change is genuine?" I asked, thinking of Gregory's apparent transformation. Time is the only reliable test, she replied. Has the person not only expressed remorse, but demonstrated sustained behavioral change? Have they taken responsibility without qualification or deflection? Have they respected boundaries consistently, not just when it's convenient or when they're being observed? I nodded, absorbing her wisdom. But reconciliation also requires something from the person who was harmed, Margaret continued. A willingness to see the other person as capable of growth, to create space for a new relationship to develop, without the expectation that it will be perfect or that trust can be instantly restored. Her words stayed with me as I walked home along the lakeshore. Could I see Gregory as capable of genuine growth? Could I create space for a new relationship without either expecting perfection or falling back into old patterns of enabling? These were questions only I could answer. That evening, I sent a message to Angela on our secure channel, considering returning after Portland exhibition next month. Need your honest assessment of G's changes, sustainable or performative? Her response came the next day. Hard to say with absolute certainty, but evidence points to real change. Financial habits completely different. Maintains modest apartment despite recent commission that could afford more. Declined loan offer from Tyler. Speaks in therapy about addiction to lifestyle beyond his means. Compulsion to exploit others, especially you. But ultimately, only you can judge if it's enough to risk return. Only I could judge. The weight of that responsibility settled heavily on my shoulders as I continued preparing for the Portland exhibition. By early April, I had completed 12 paintings for the show, each capturing Cedar Lake through different seasons, weather conditions, and times of day. Together, they told the story of my year of transformation, though no viewer would recognize that narrative. The gallery owner was ecstatic when I delivered the collection. These exceed my expectations, Virginia. There's such depth and emotional resonance in your work now. The evolution from your earlier pieces is remarkable. She insisted on photographing each painting for the exhibition catalog and online promotion. I reluctantly agreed, though part of me worried about these images potentially reaching Pine Ridge, but the odds seemed minimal. Why would anyone there be browsing a small Portland gallery's website? 2 weeks before the exhibition opening, I received another call from the gallery owner. That Denver collector I mentioned, they've seen the online catalog and are absolutely determined to acquire your Mountain Vista piece before the exhibition opens. They're offering $5,000, well above your asking price. I told them I needed to consult with you first. $5,000 for a painting that had taken me less than a week to create. The amount was staggering to someone who had carefully budgeted a teacher's salary and pension for decades. Why that particular piece? I asked, my unease growing. They said it reminds them of home, of someone they've lost. The Mountain Vista. Of all my new works, it most closely resembled the view from my Pine Ridge porch, the view I'd gazed at every morning for decades, the view Gregory had grown up with. I had painted it during a moment of intense homesickness, infusing it with detailed memories of Colorado's particular light and shadow. Could it really be Gregory? Had my son somehow discovered my artwork without knowing its creator's true identity? The possibility seemed simultaneously impossible and poetically perfect. The collector wants to know if they can meet you, the gallery owner continued. They're willing to come to Cedar Lake if you're not planning to attend the opening reception. My heart raced at the suggestion. If it was Gregory, meeting him unprepared could be disastrous. But if it wasn't, if it was simply an art enthusiast who connected with my work, refusing a meeting might seem oddly suspicious. I prefer to maintain my privacy, I said carefully. Please thank them for their interest and generous offer. I'm willing to sell the piece before the exhibition, but I'm not available for meetings. The gallery owner seemed disappointed but understanding. Artists and their quirks, she said good-naturedly. I'll arrange the sale. The collector will be thrilled. After ending the call, I sat on Walter's porch for hours, watching the sunset reflect on Cedar Lake's still surface, contemplating the strange twist of fate that might have led my son to unknowingly purchase his missing mother's artwork. If it was indeed Gregory, and some intuition told me it was, there was a powerful symbolism in the transaction. He had valued something I created without knowing its source, had seen beauty and meaning in my work without the complicating lens of our troubled relationship. Perhaps this was the sign I'd been waiting for. Perhaps it was time to end my self-imposed exile and face whatever awaited me in Pine Ridge, reconciliation or rejection, forgiveness or further estrangement. Perhaps Virginia Miller had taught Vivian Sullivan everything she needed to know about standing on her own, about creating value rather than just providing it, about establishing healthy boundaries without sacrificing love. That night, I made my decision. After the Portland exhibition, after confirming whether the Denver collector was indeed my son, I would return to Pine Ridge, not as the same woman who had fled in desperation 7 months earlier, but as someone transformed by distance and creative discovery, someone stronger, clearer, more capable of both compassion and boundary setting. I sent a final message to Angela. Coming home after Portland show in May. We'll need your help with arrangements. Time to end this chapter and begin a new one, for all of us. Her response was simple, but filled with emotion I could feel across the digital distance. We'll be ready. Whatever happens, I'm proud of you, Mom. As spring blossomed fully around Cedar Lake, I began mentally preparing for the journey home. I organized my affairs as Virginia Miller, arranged for the care of my remaining paintings, wrote thank you notes to Ruth and the other friends I'd made at the senior center. I created a story about a family emergency requiring my return to Michigan, not a complete lie in its way. And I painted one last piece, a small canvas depicting a doorway standing open between two landscapes. On one side, Cedar Lake in full spring glory. On the other, the familiar mountains of Pine Ridge. The threshold between them glowed with golden light, symbolizing not an ending or a beginning, but an integration of two worlds, two selves, two chapters of a single life. The Portland exhibition exceeded all expectations. The gallery buzzed with art enthusiasts, critics, and collectors on opening night. Though I observed it all remotely through photos and videos the gallery owner sent me. My entire collection sold within the first weekend, an unprecedented success for an unknown artist's debut show. The Mountain Vista piece had already gone to the mysterious Denver collector, but the remaining 11 paintings found homes with various buyers, earning me a sum that would have seemed impossible just months ago. People connect with the emotional authenticity in your work, the gallery owner explained during our phone conversation. There's something deeply personal yet universal in how you capture these landscapes. Everyone seems to find their own meaning in them. I thanked her sincerely but declined her immediate offers for future exhibitions. I need to take care of some personal matters first, I explained. Family obligations back in Michigan. With the exhibition's success behind me, I focused on preparing for my return to Pine Ridge. I confirmed through discreet inquiries that the Denver collector was indeed Gregory Sullivan. My son had unknowingly purchased his missing mother's artwork. This cosmic coincidence felt like validation of my decision to return, a sign that invisible threads still connected us despite everything that had happened. Angela and I finalized the logistics through our secure channel. She would fly to Portland, rent a car, and drive me back to Colorado. This approach would allow us privacy for the difficult conversations we needed to have and give me time to prepare for facing Gregory and the community I had left behind. My last week in Cedar Lake was bittersweet. I said goodbye to the friends I'd made. Using my cover story about family matters in Michigan, Ruth hugged me tightly at our final painting session. "You'll continue with your art, won't you?" she asked. "No matter what happens with this family situation?" "I promise," I replied, meaning it completely. Painting had become essential to me, not just a hobby or even a source of income, but a form of self-expression and discovery I couldn't imagine abandoning. Margaret Chen organized a small farewell gathering at the senior center. As I looked around at the faces of people who had known only Virginia Miller, who had accepted and valued me without the weight of past history or expectations, I felt profound gratitude for this time of reinvention. Whatever happened next, these months had changed me irrevocably. Angela arrived on a Wednesday morning in early May. When I opened the cabin door to find my daughter standing there, her eyes filled with tears, her arms instantly opening to embrace me, the emotions I'd been holding at bay crashed through my carefully constructed barriers. We clung to each other, both sobbing, neither able to speak for several minutes. Finally, Angela pulled back to look at me, wiping her eyes. "You look different, Mom. Younger somehow." "I feel different," I admitted, ushering her inside. "Not younger exactly, but more myself, if that makes any sense." We spent that first day talking, really talking, as I hadn't done with either of my children in years. I showed her my paintings, explained how I'd discovered this unexpected talent, shared stories about my life as Virginia Miller. She updated me on her own life in Portland, on Tyler's progress in law school, and most significantly, on the changes she'd observed in Gregory. "He's not the same person, Mom," she said, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset over Cedar Lake. "When you first disappeared, he was frantic, desperate, but still focused on himself, on how your absence affected him. But as weeks turned to months, something shifted. He started talking about regrets, about patterns he'd recognized in himself. Do you believe it's genuine?" I asked, the question that had haunted me throughout my absence. Angela considered this carefully. "I do. It wasn't an overnight transformation. It happened gradually with backsliding and struggles. That's what makes me think it's real. If he were just performing grief for sympathy or attention, he wouldn't have maintained it consistently for 7 months, especially in private moments when no one was watching." She described how Gregory had downsized his life dramatically, selling his luxury SUV for a practical used car, moving from his upscale apartment to a modest 2-bedroom, cutting expenses that had once seemed essential to his self-image. How he committed to therapy not just weekly but twice weekly during the most difficult periods. How he'd begun volunteering at a financial literacy program for low-income families, using his real estate knowledge to help people avoid predatory lending practices. "He talks about you constantly," Angela continued. "Not just about missing you or wanting you back, but about lessons you tried to teach him that he ignored, values you embodied that he dismissed. He says he finally understands what you meant when you used to tell us that true security comes from within, not from possessions or appearances." I absorbed these details, trying to reconcile them with the Gregory who had shouted demands about my pension, who had exploited my maternal love for years. Could people truly change so fundamentally? Or was I setting myself up for disappointment? "What about Tyler?" I asked, thinking of my grandson caught in this painful situation. "Tyler's been Gregory's rock, actually. He moved in with his father after you disappeared, partly to support him, partly to keep an eye on him, I think. Their relationship has improved tremendously. Tyler says they're talking honestly for the first time in years." The next morning, we packed the few belongings I wanted to bring back to Colorado, mostly my painting supplies, a few clothes, and the small canvas depicting the doorway between two worlds. Everything else would stay in the cabin for Walter to deal with when he next visited. I left him a heartfelt letter of thanks, along with one of my unsold paintings as a gift. As Angela drove us away from Cedar Lake, I watched the small town recede in the side mirror. Virginia Miller would cease to exist after today, but she had given Vivian Sullivan gifts that would endure: confidence, creativity, independence, and a clearer sense of self-worth. The drive to Colorado took 2 days. We avoided discussion of what awaited us in Pine Ridge, instead using the time to reconnect as mother and daughter. Angela shared stories about her work, her friends, her tentative new relationship with a fellow hospital administrator. I told her about Ruth's painting lessons, about the senior center activities, about discovering joy in creation. On the final stretch of highway leading into the Colorado mountains, anxiety began to rise within me. How would Gregory react to learning his mother had voluntarily disappeared? How would the community receive me after mobilizing so much energy for search efforts? Would they understand my reasons or condemn me for the pain I'd caused? "It's not too late to change your mind," Angela said quietly, sensing my tension. "We could turn around, go back to Portland. You could start fresh there as yourself, not Virginia Miller." I considered this option briefly. It would certainly be easier than facing the consequences of my actions, the potential rejection or anger that might await me. But it would also mean living in hiding forever, looking over my shoulder, worrying about being recognized. More importantly, it would mean never knowing if reconciliation with Gregory was possible. "No," I said firmly. "I need to finish what I started. Whatever happens next, I need to face it directly." As we approached Pine Ridge, Familiar landmarks emerged. The welcome sign with its mountain backdrop, the gas station where Roger and I had always stopped for coffee on road trips, the elementary school where I'd taught for 3 decades. Everything looked exactly as I remembered, yet somehow different, as if I were seeing these familiar sights through new eyes. "I've arranged everything as you asked," Angela said as we drove through town. "Tyler's bringing Gregory to your house at 7 tonight. They think it's for a meeting with a detective who has new information. No one else knows you're coming back today." I nodded, my throat too tight for speech. We drove past my small house on Maple Street, unchanged externally, though I noticed fresh flowers planted in the front beds, the lawn neatly maintained. According to Angela, Gregory had been caring for my property throughout my absence, ensuring everything would be ready when I returned. We checked into a small hotel on the outskirts of town, where I could compose myself before the evening's confrontation. I showered, changed into clothes that Vivian Sullivan would wear rather than Virginia Miller, and tried to calm my racing heart. At 6:30, Angela drove us to my house. We entered using the spare key she'd kept, finding the interior exactly as I'd left it 7 months ago, with one striking addition. On every available surface, tables, shelves, mantelpiece, stood framed photographs of me. Me as a young teacher, me with Roger on our wedding day, me holding baby Gregory, me with both children at Angela's college graduation, me surrounded by students at my retirement party. "He created a shrine to you," Angela explained softly. "He sits here sometimes," Tyler says. "Just sits and talks to your photos." The knowledge pierced my heart. What pain had my disappearance caused? Had my desperate plan been worth the suffering it inflicted? At precisely 7 o'clock, we heard a car pull into the driveway. Angela squeezed my hand reassuringly, then positioned herself near the kitchen doorway, where she could observe without immediately being seen. The front door opened, and Tyler's voice reached us first. "I still don't understand why this detective wanted to meet here, Dad. Seems weird, right? They probably think being in Grandma's house might trigger some memory or reaction," Gregory replied, his voice so familiar yet somehow altered, heavier, more subdued than I remembered. They entered the living room, neither immediately noticing me, sitting quietly in Roger's old armchair in the corner. Tyler saw me first. He froze mid-step, his tall frame suddenly rigid with shock, his face draining of color. "Grandma?" The word emerged as a choked whisper. Gregory turned to follow his son's gaze. When our eyes met, time seemed to suspend. He stood perfectly still, his expression transitioning from confusion to disbelief to something I couldn't quite name, a complex mixture of joy, pain, and dawning comprehension. "Mom," he took a halting step toward me, then stopped as if afraid I might vanish if he moved too quickly. "Is it really you? How? Where?" I rose slowly from the chair, steady despite my pounding heart. "It's me, Gregory. I've come home." Tyler recovered first, rushing forward to embrace me with a sob. I held my grandson tightly, feeling his tears wet my shoulder, murmuring apologies for the pain I'd caused him. When we finally separated, I turned to face my son. Gregory hadn't moved. He stood rooted to the spot, tears streaming unchecked down his face. "You're alive," he whispered. "All this time, you were alive." "Yes, you left voluntarily." It wasn't a question, but a realization, spoken with dawning clarity. "You disappeared on purpose." I nodded, maintaining eye contact despite the tremendous urge to look away from the raw emotion in his face. "Because of me, because of what I did to you, what I became." "Yes," I said again, my voice gentle but unflinching. The silence that followed felt eternal. Tyler moved to stand beside his father, placing a supportive hand on his shoulder. Angela emerged from the kitchen doorway, completing our family circle. Finally, Gregory spoke again, his voice broken but steady. "You were right to go. I wouldn't have listened any other way. I wouldn't have changed." With those words, that acknowledgement, something shifted in the room. The terrible tension began to dissolve, replaced by a fragile but real possibility of healing. "I found your painting," Gregory continued, "the mountain scene in the Portland Gallery. I didn't know it was yours, but it spoke to me. It reminded me of home, of you. I had to have it." "I know," I said softly. "I painted it thinking of this place, of these mountains we both love." He took a hesitant step toward me, Can you ever forgive me, Mom? For what I did to you? For making you feel you had to disappear to escape me? I considered his question carefully, wanting my answer to be honest rather than merely comforting. I'm here because I believe forgiveness is possible, I said finally. Not instant or unconditional, but possible, if we both do the work to rebuild what was broken, with clear boundaries and mutual respect. He nodded, accepting this qualified response without protest. Another sign of change I wouldn't have witnessed 7 months ago. I'd like to show you something, I said, reaching for my bag. I withdrew the small canvas I'd completed before leaving Cedar Lake, the doorway between two landscapes. This is what I see now. Not an ending or a beginning, but a threshold between what was and what could be. Gregory studied the painting, understanding dawning in his eyes. Virginia Miller, he said quietly. That was you. All those paintings in the Portland Gallery? Yes. I discovered something about myself during our time apart. Something I might never have found if I'd stayed. He handed the canvas back carefully, with a reverence that acknowledged its significance. Will you tell me about it? About where you were? What you did? I want to know everything. I will, I promised. In time. But first, we need to talk about why I left. Really talk, without defenses or evasions on either side. And so we did. The four of us sat in my living room until well past midnight, having the most honest conversation our family had experienced in decades. Gregory spoke of his gradual descent into financial dependency, of using manipulation to extract money, of the entitlement he'd developed that allowed him to justify exploiting his own mother. I described the pain of being valued only for what I could provide, the fear for my future as my savings dwindled, the desperate decision to disappear rather than continue enabling destructive patterns. There were difficult moments, tears, defensive responses quickly recognized and retracted, painful truths acknowledged. But there was also laughter, warmth, and most importantly, hope. Hope that we could establish a new relationship built on authenticity rather than exploitation, on mutual support rather than one-sided sacrifice. As dawn approached, we made tentative plans for the days ahead. I would stay with Angela at the hotel temporarily, allowing myself space while reintegrating into Pine Ridge life. We would consult with the police to officially close the missing person case, develop a simplified explanation for the community about my absence, and continue the difficult conversations as a family. When Gregory and Tyler finally prepared to leave, my son paused at the doorway, turning back with an expression of vulnerability I'd rarely seen on his face. Mom, your pension comes in next Tuesday, right? I tensed involuntarily, old patterns flashing through my mind. Had everything been manipulation after all? Was he reverting to type at the first opportunity? But then he continued, his voice soft with remorse. I'd like to start repaying what I took from you over the years. I've been setting aside money each month. It's not much yet, but it's a start. Would it be okay if I bring you a check on Tuesday? The first of many, I hope. The knot in my chest dissolved, replaced by cautious optimism. This wasn't the Gregory who had demanded my pension 7 months ago. This was someone new, or perhaps someone who had been there all along, buried beneath layers of entitlement and selfishness. That would be fine, I replied simply. After they left, Angela and I stood together on the porch, watching the sun rise over the familiar mountains of Pine Ridge. The same peaks I'd painted from memory in Cedar Lake now stood before me in reality, solid and unchanging despite all that had transformed within me. Do you think it will work? Angela asked quietly. This new beginning with Gregory? I considered her question, wanting neither to succumb to naive optimism nor cynical doubt. I don't know, I answered honestly, but I do know that we both have changed, and change creates possibility. As we walked to Angela's car, I glanced back at my house, the home I had fled in desperation 7 months ago, the home I might eventually return to on new terms. Virginia Miller's artistic talent would continue to flow through Vivian Sullivan's hands. The strength and clarity I had discovered in Cedar Lake would inform how I rebuilt my life in Pine Ridge. Whatever happened next, I knew with absolute certainty that I would never again allow myself to be valued only for what I could give, rather than who I was. The woman who had whispered, "I'm tired of this exploitation. I'm going to have to do this," had taken a desperate gamble that had changed everything, not just for her son, but for herself. And in that transformation lay the most unexpected gift of all. Looking back on the journey that began with those painful words, "When will your pension come out? I want to use it right away to pay my bills," I can hardly believe the transformation that has occurred in both my life and Gregory's. What started as an act of desperation, disappearing without a trace to teach my exploitative son a lesson, became an unexpected path to self-discovery and mutual healing. In the 2 years since that emotional reunion in my Pine Ridge living room, our family has rebuilt itself on entirely new foundations. Gregory has remained committed to his personal growth, continuing therapy even when it became financially challenging. He's repaid nearly half of what he took from me over the years, not because I demanded it, but because he recognized it as necessary for his own integrity. Most importantly, he's learned to see me as a complete person with my own needs, dreams, and boundaries, not just as mom, an endless resource to be tapped. As for me, Vivian Sullivan and Virginia Miller have fully integrated into a single, more confident woman. I've established a small but successful art business, selling my paintings through galleries in both Pine Ridge and Portland. My work has been featured in regional art magazines, and I've even begun teaching painting at the very same senior center where I once felt so exploited and undervalued. The income from my art, combined with my teacher's pension that now remains firmly in my control, provides me with financial security I never thought possible. I moved back into my Pine Ridge home eventually, but with clear boundaries established. Gregory visits weekly for dinner, but always calls first. We talk openly about finances when necessary, but those conversations no longer carry the weight of obligation or entitlement. When he faced a genuine crisis last winter, a medical emergency that his insurance didn't fully cover, I chose to help him with part of the expense, not from guilt or manipulation, but from love freely given, with no expectation of repayment. Tyler graduated from law school with honors and now works for a nonprofit providing legal assistance to senior citizens facing financial exploitation. He tells me that my experience inspired his career choice, that he wants to help others avoid the pain our family endured. Angela has become more involved in both our lives, visiting Colorado monthly rather than yearly, strengthening bonds that had been strained by distance and unspoken tensions. The community of Pine Ridge eventually accepted the simplified version of my story, that I had experienced a personal crisis and needed time away to heal. Some people understand there's more to the tale. Others accept it at face value. I've learned that I don't owe everyone a complete explanation of my choices. Some stories belong just to those who lived them. Perhaps the most profound change has been in my relationship with myself. At 69, I've discovered parts of my identity that had remained dormant throughout decades of caring for others. The courage it took to walk away from an exploitative situation, to prioritize my own well-being, to establish firm boundaries. These actions revealed a strength I never knew I possessed. The artistic talent that emerged during my time as Virginia Miller continues to flourish, providing not just income, but genuine fulfillment. If you're watching this and recognizing your own situation in mine, if you're being financially exploited by family members, if your boundaries are continuously violated, if you're valued only for what you can provide rather than who you are, know that change is possible. It may not require the extreme measure I took, but it will certainly require courage, clarity, and an unwavering commitment to your own worth. I'm not suggesting everyone in my situation should disappear for 7 months. That was my unique path, shaped by specific circumstances and years of failed attempts at other solutions. But I am suggesting that sometimes the most loving thing you can do, both for yourself and for those exploiting you, is to break the pattern completely, to create space for genuine transformation. Where are you watching from? Have you experienced similar exploitation from family members? Or perhaps you recognize yourself in Gregory, someone who has taken advantage of a parent's generosity without recognizing the harm you were causing. I truly want to hear your stories, your reflections, your own journeys toward healthier relationships. Please share them in the comments below. Your words might be exactly what another viewer needs to find their own courage. If my story has resonated with you, please consider subscribing to Revenge Expected, where we share powerful stories of transformation and reclaimed dignity. Each week, we feature real people who have found creative ways to break destructive patterns in their lives and relationships. Hit the notification bell so you won't miss our upcoming episode about a father who had to make a difficult choice to help his daughter overcome addiction. Creating these videos requires significant effort and resources, from researching and writing compelling narratives to filming and editing high-quality content. If you found value in my story and would like to support our mission of empowering others through shared experiences, please consider using the Super Thanks button below. Your contribution helps cover the costs of production and allows us to bring you more powerful stories every day. Even a small donation makes a meaningful difference in our ability to continue this important work. Don't forget to leave a like on this video if it touched you in any way. Each like helps our channel reach more people who might be struggling with similar situations, feeling alone and unsure how to break free from cycles of exploitation. Look through our other videos too. You'll find stories of courage, resilience, and transformation that span many different relationships and circumstances. From parents and children to spouses, siblings, and friends, we explore the complex dynamics that can lead to exploitation and the brave steps people take to restore balance and dignity. I never imagined that my story would reach so many people, that my private struggle would become a source of inspiration for others. Creating this video wasn't easy. Reliving those painful memories, acknowledging both the desperation that drove me to such an extreme measure and the unexpected gifts that came from it. But if my experience helps even one person recognize their own worth and find the courage to establish healthy boundaries, then every difficult moment of sharing it has been worthwhile. Remember, your value doesn't lie in what you can provide to others. It doesn't depend on your usefulness, your resources, your willingness to sacrifice your own needs. Your value is inherent, unchangeable, and worthy of protection. Sometimes the greatest act of love, both for yourself and for those who have become dependent on exploiting you, is to say enough and mean it. Thank you for watching, for listening, for being part of this community of healing and growth. Until next time on Revenge Expected, this is Vivian Sullivan, reminding you that it's never too late to reclaim your dignity, establish healthy boundaries, and discover unexpected gifts along the way, even at 67, even after decades of putting everyone else first. Your new chapter is waiting to begin.